And we are live.
Wow.
I feel like iCarly when I just said that.
I love iCarly.
I'm Freddie Benson. All right, everybody. I have my beautiful, I shouldn't say baby sister because you're one of my few baby sisters. So this is one of them. But this is Delaney. She's going to be sharing with us today her life in HD. You want to say hi to everybody?
Hello, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. I'm a fan of the Champions for HD podcast. I really enjoy it.
Oh, well, she's biased because she's my sister.
Yeah, that's for sure. I would say most people who listen would think it.
Oh, no, she's always the first one to go listen to the podcast, or if I have a new YouTube video, she's the first one to go watch that and tell me how she liked it. And she's also on our board. So, of course, she's, supporting HD and she's a college student. So, she's very busy. So, I thank you for taking the time out of your Wednesday to talk with me.
Of course.
So, how is school like for you right now?
It has been interesting. This semester was actually a lot different. My last semester of school, it was completely online. Like I had to learn everything just here in my room. And last semester I was actually an engineering major, so trying to teach myself everything, just in my room watching videos was not the most successful. Didn't click with me as well as going to class. So last semester was not my most shining moment, and I've since changed my major. I'm now marketing. So I'm a marketing major, and since I go to school in Alabama, things are a little bit different here than they are. Well, I know all around the country, like things are so different depending on what
Yeah, they
state.
really are.
Yeah, for sure. But here, they are definitely trying to not move past COVID because obviously we're still living it. Like we have to do what we can to take as much precaution as we can, but they're actually trying to get us into class a lot more. Which even though there's a pandemic, I do appreciate it because the online learning really was not good for me. It's just so hard to like get in the mindset of like I'm a full-time student when I'm never going to school.
Yeah.
So most of my classes are on campus now. Obviously, we're all like in masks and like we have to sit 6 feet apart and we sit in like little plastic cubbies. So
Oh,
for sure, but
oh my
I
gosh.
I already feel like this semester is going much better, actually being able to get some in-person instruction. So
Uh,
it's been nice, yeah.
I didn't realize the whole cubby thing. That
Yeah.
reminds me of, do you remember in elementary school? I don't know if anyone else had this, but you and I had it because we both went to the same elementary school. When we took tests, they would put dividers up so you wouldn't
Really
cheat.
huge.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah. It's definitely very similar vibes. They're like clear, so you can see through them, but it's still so weird. And like the professors say that when they look out because of the lighting, there's glares on all of like the
Oh,
cubbies. They said they really like can't even see us.
yeah, that's so hard, especially because, I mean, most of you college students are still paying the same price to be at school, even if it's online. But I actually talked to some people who are going to school up here in Michigan and they're still online. A lot of universities
Yeah.
up here are still online. And the girl I was talking to earlier this week, she said that she has like a 3 hour class that meets weekly and trying to pay attention online because there's so
Yeah.
many distractions,
Mhm.
which I feel so bad because when I was in college, I mean, yeah, you can complain about walking to class and carrying
Mhm.
your backpack, but it's like you said, you don't really get into that mindset unless if you're doing it. And
Definitely.
if a professor's walking up and down your rows and trying to ask you questions and you can physically see them and hear them, you kind of, you're just more, you know,
Yeah, definitely.
so, oh my gosh. Well, we'll see. I thought 2021 might be different, but not gonna lie, I was less optimistic when the ball dropped than when the ball dropped for 2020 because I was like, "Woohoo, new year!" And this year I went, "Well, it's
Sure.
probably gonna be more COVID, maybe a
Mhm.
vaccine."
I
But
think we all were really optimistic. I saw a tweet once that was like, just a reminder, guys, like just because the New Year clock strikes, like doesn't mean the pandemic's over. And I'm like, don't remind us.
wouldn't that be
We're
nice if it was like,
optimistic.
Cinderella when at midnight everything just went back to the way it was? That'd
Very
be so
nice for
nice,
sure.
but life
Mhm.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I hope
So
that maybe towards the end of 2021, we've got vaccines starting to be administered. I hope things might get a little more normal.
I think by the end of the year, I was just on the phone with mom and then my boss before that because I just got done with work. Lainey hopped on here. She had a nap after class, and I just got done with work and threw
I
on some
did.
makeup. That's my thing with having work virtually. I just don't want to do my makeup because I only see
Oh,
one or
for
two people on the camera all day long. So I had to throw on some makeup. But I was talking to my boss and then our mom, and my gut is telling me, even though we have the vaccines, I don't see any sort of quote unquote normalcy until probably like the fall or the winter. I don't think we're going to have any normalcy throughout the summer because there's vaccines, but the amount of people who want it and the amount that they have
Yeah,
is so skewed. My boss said something about like some clinic was offering free vaccinations to anyone who signed up, or like first come first serve,
mhm.
and there were 2,500 vaccines available and there were like 20,000 people who signed up.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it'll be until maybe like fall, which sucks, but it'll happen. Science doesn't happen overnight. And we know that, unfortunately, with Huntington's, because otherwise we would have a cure by now, you know?
Yep.
Actually, that's what Lainey wanted to start out in, was neurology.
That is true. I had a lot of interest in being able to help in some way with HD in my career, but I have faith that even though I switched my path, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no opportunities to like give back in my career. Because like marketing, what I'm doing, I could be doing something like champions or even
Mhm.
just helping out with champions, and that's still using my skills to give back as much as I can. And I also did consider, as much as I feel like it would be filling to like go to my job every day and do what I can to fight HD. I did think that I already think so much about it that do I really want my job to I go and I just think about HD all the time because I did when I started. I specifically thought it would be really cool if I could see HD patients. While I do think that would be very fulfilling for me, I also do think that it might be good for me to be able to go to my job and not think about HD at the same time. So
Yeah.
I mean, I have no clue what I'm gonna end up doing. I'm not sure yet, but
Lainey's going to be a professional video editor with a marketing degree.
oh wow, that would be the dream. That would be the dream. Hey,
Yep.
I could edit champions videos. There's definitely ways to incorporate everything to
Yeah. No, balance is really important. And I guess I never put that into perspective until you just said it, because even though working at, 9 to 5 ish, I say ish because my job technically is more like 8 to 4:30, but basically 9 to 5. It's not always fulfilling in that you see all the things that you wanted to do coming out of that job. But yeah, if it's just to get away from reality for a bit and you're focusing on those tasks that someone's giving you, I definitely don't really think about HD when I'm trying to make Excel spreadsheets or social media posts. So speaking of HD, so everyone, for the most part, if you're listening and you've heard me tell my story or our story, but from my perspective, or if you've watched my YouTube video, Lainey and I come from the same family, and I hate bringing up the family tree because, in my opinion, family is family no matter how it looks, but we are a blended family, and technically Lainey is my only full biological sister, so we share the same mother and father. So I feel like our experience and how we grew up was very similar, just because we were always together, whereas sometimes with our other siblings it was 50-50, just because of custody that we had and that they had with their other parents. So Lainey and I went through it all. So going back to when we found out about Huntington's, which was all the way back, I hate to say all the way back, but 2015 was 6 years ago now.
That's
Like
great.
it's been 6 years since
Yeah,
Grandpa got diagnosed. Does it does it feel like it's been six
no,
years?
not at all. I
Oh
still
my
remember
god.
the feeling when I first heard about it, and I was like, "What is that?"
So when do you think you finally understood what it was, or
I
that it
don't.
actually set in?
I honestly don't think I fully understood until I started seeing the symptoms, like in Dad and Brianna. because obviously as soon as I found out about it, I did some research, but if you Google it, all it's gonna say is like a cognitive, physical, like it kind of has it all, and you're like, oh, all right, that sounds scary, but you don't really realize everything that it encompasses until you start to see it. Um, so I think that's when it got really real and really scary, was when I started to hear about the problems that grandpa was having, or starting to see the symptoms of HD in dad and Brianna. That's definitely when it got real for me. At first, it was just like, what is this? I'm going to do my basic research and try to
Right.
understand, but I don't really get it until I started like experiencing it through family.
Yeah, I would agree. I always tell people I thought that it was just an aftermath of him recovering from cancer. And
Yeah.
then when he finally got tested, and then our dad finally decided to get tested after like a year of nagging him. And
Mhm.
then that was when it really set in for me was, oh, it's a domino effect. And I don't know which side of the domino I'm going to get. So when we found out that we were at risk, I know I immediately wanted to get tested. And I still to this day cannot really explain it to anyone, including myself. It was just one of those God gut feelings telling
Yeah.
me I needed to do it. And I've never looked back. It definitely sits in my head some days more than others. But you initially wanted to get tested right away. So I was 19. Lainey and I are 4 years apart. So you were only 15.
Yeah.
And legally, the way that the system works is you're not supposed to get tested without symptoms before you're 18, just because unfortunately the mental health and the suicide rates can be really high in the HD community, especially once you start getting these diagnoses. So, where's your mindset shifted from when you were 15 to now she's almost 20?
It's definitely a bit different. I think a lot of my feelings initially were that we found out about it. We didn't know like too much about it, but we knew that we were at risk. And you felt very strongly. You were like, I want to get tested. I want to know. And I think a lot of it was that I look up to you so much that I was like, yeah, yeah, let's get tested.
Oh,
So I definitely was like in that boat with you initially. I was like, I just want to know. But again, I was what, 15 when we found out. So
yeah,
I think
baby.
I think it was honestly for the best that they have those limitations in place, that, you probably should be an adult to really know, really make that decision for yourself whether or not you're prepared. And I don't think I really realized that all at 15. But now that I'm 19, I see it a little differently. I know for sure that I'm gonna get tested someday because I know that I want to have kids nowhere soon. Probably when I'm like 30.
Mom and
But
dad, if you're listening, she said nowhere soon.
yeah, I mean in like 10 years. But someday I want to have kids, and so I know it is possible to do in vitro without even being tested. You can just do it as a
Mhm.
precaution. I didn't really realize that until I listened to the last episode.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. So I guess it is technically an option to not even get tested. Because for some people it's just too much to know. It's almost better with the unknown. But I feel like 10 years down the line, if I'm about to have kids, I'll probably be ready for it for sure. And I think I would prefer to know, because obviously for everyone it's their own personal decision, but I do like the thought of, if I know I'm positive or negative, I can participate in like clinicals and stuff, and I know it's more beneficial for them if they have that information. So right now my feelings are kind of, I'm young, there's no need for me to know at the moment, and I kind
Mhm.
of enjoy not knowing. But somewhere down the road, I definitely see myself getting tested. I just don't think I'm ready for that right now, so I'm not gonna put that on myself for a little bit.
No, and testing is one of those tricky subjects that I always try to tread on lightly. That pregnancies in the HD community, those types of things, because everyone approaches it so differently and everyone's psychological needs and family dynamics are so different. So I know we were really blessed that, and we'll probably get into it, even though we had a toxic turmoil childhood, really in hindsight because of Huntington's, we were blessed in the fact that our immediate family was open about it even after the diagnoses started coming into play. with dad, with grandpa, with Brianna, there was no hiding it. Everyone was super open on that front. We do have other family who is not very open, and that is 100% okay and respected. But
There's no really wrong with all the
no,
stuff for sure.
but I know that there have been times where, we're out playing at bars and I'll sing champion and someone will come up to us and just say, my family has it or we're at risk, but we don't talk about it because my dad doesn't like to, or he's at risk and hasn't gotten tested. And I know I'm at risk and we're worried about not getting employment or not getting life insurance, all these things that definitely come into play. And looking back, I probably should have had a better plan for, because I don't have life insurance aside from what my company just offers.
Mhm.
But there are people who are in a family dynamic where speaking about it, even if that's what they might want to do in their gut, isn't something that they can do because they have family who doesn't want other people to know. And so for us, I think it has been, such a blessing that we can talk about it openly, and no one is afraid to talk about those darker sides of living with Huntington's and many generations of our family.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also, in a way, we were kind of forced to deal with it as well because for some people they might know about it, but maybe not a lot of them have it. They got really lucky, or their family members who have it aren't symptomatic yet. And I feel like at that point it's so much easier to just pretend that it's not something that you're gonna have to go through. But so soon after we found out about it is when our family already started experiencing symptoms. Like we started to see it in grandpa and dad, we started to notice his symptoms, and obviously Brianna declined so quickly that we almost like didn't have a choice. Like there was no ignoring that this was happening to us. Like it was staring at us in the face all the time. So I definitely, in a way, I respect. Like if Huntington's wasn't like right in front of me so often, I probably would be like, you know what, I'm just gonna go about my day and be happy for each day. But in a way, we, we kind of just had to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's hard to find balance because, like you said, not only is it in the back of your mind that you're at risk, but you have other people in the family who are gene positive or symptomatic, or, people that we lost. And so, as much as you can try to suppress it, it's always there. And it's such a strange phenomenon because I feel the same way. Like, there are some days where I get through most of the day before I even think about it, just because I'm either, doing something that keeps me active or happy, or like you said, even just the stresses of work or school. Um, but it's always there. And finding a balance is really hard. And I think that that's probably the most pivotal point of the testing process, is when they bring you to that therapist 2 times,
yeah,
because they want to make sure that when you get that test result, because I mean, they've said that there have been people who get all the way through it, and then at that last moment, they decide they don't want to flip the piece of paper around and see what it says. And that's okay. But
yeah,
once you get it, you can't go back. And so, how are you going to process it? How are you going to handle it? And I know my mentality the whole time was, obviously, it's going to be devastating. And I knew that whether it was positive or negative, because apparently there is a gray area, but with our family genetics, our repeat is so high that our genetic counselor was like, listen, there's no recessing or regressing, I guess is the right word, that many counts on your gene. You're either going to have it or not. You being in the gray area where you could not have symptoms but still maybe pass it on, like that's not even an option for your family. So I knew that either I was going to have to fight it head on from, my own diagnosis, or I was going to have that survivor's guilt, which I knew would have come if I was, gene negative. But then I would be looking at dad or grandpa or Brie and going, oh, well, why me? And that is another huge part that they press the therapy for, is because there is survivor's guilt. I had another girl on here, Ashley, all the way back in May of last year, but it didn't premiere until December of 2020. And she talked about that because she had a negative result, and she still, feels guilty about the people in her family who didn't have that. And she also said, which this is terrifying to think about, because I would probably do this, but she said there's still times where she questions, did they get my numbers wrong? Like, did they switch my test?
Yeah.
Was there something off? So even if you get a negative result, there's no way of just pushing it out of your life.
Yeah.
So how do you manage, like, what would you say is your scapegoat or your go-to to get your head out of that place?
That is a very good question. I think that my coping mechanisms aren't always healthy. Um, I I'm very aware, at least I'm aware of the fact that I do this, but I
Mhm.
tend to, if something is really bothering me, like I choose to just not think about it, which might not be the healthiest. Um,
I'm
but
laughing because Lainey and I are very similar in our
yeah,
coping
for sure,
mechanisms.
sure. At the same time, like when HD is happening to you and the things that we've dealt with, like if I let that consume me all the time, I don't even think I would be able to like function, you know? So I feel like you have to find a way to like put it on the back burner. And so, um,
It's
sorry.
okay. You can talk about K-pop.
I think that is a good point. I have my entire life, and I think this is not to be deep, I guess, but probably just due to traumas. I don't want to make it sound like I've had it so bad because so many people, obviously, I hear people's lives and I'm just like, oh God, like I'm so lucky. I live such a great life. But we've definitely been through a lot. We've had a lot of adversity thrown at us. It's definitely built us into the people we are today, built up our resilience, so that's always good. But I feel like my whole life I've gone through, kind of traumatic things that are probably a little out of the norm. And so I tend to find phases and I kind of just like obsess over them. And I think that is like an actual problem that I have. I am aware of that because it's very hard for me to just like something, like
Oh,
see
yeah.
something I really like and be like, oh, that's cool. Like, I don't do that. Like,
Oh, yeah.
my
You're
room,
either all in or you're
yeah,
just
for sure.
like just an average fan. You're like, yeah, I like it, but like I'm not there. But yeah, so Lainey loves K-pop. We both love going to concerts,
K-pop,
which
yeah.
has not happened in over a year now,
Yeah, for sure. I
which
guess in
is
a way
sad.
it is so sad. It's what I miss the most.
Me too.
Well, obviously, people being healthy, that's a major concern. But if we're just talking about fun things, I do really, really miss concerts. But I guess you could just say I have like a music obsession as a whole, because it's not just K-pop, it's also like Lady Gaga. But I
Mm.
definitely I think music is the thing that I distract myself with the most, whether it's like me pursuing music and like singing or consuming in someone else's content, their music or interviews or whatever. That's definitely a fun way for me to distance myself from everything and distract myself. So I do think in a way that my obsessive personality throughout my life, I've tried to like connect the dots, like why do I obsess over things so bad? And I think it's because I have so much on my mind that I need to be able to not think about, that I need to have something that like I can put my attention on this and I'm not going to think about anything else because like I love it so much that it's enough to distract me for the 20 minutes or whatever. Obviously all this stuff never goes away, but I think people definitely need an outlet where they can put their energy into it and leave all this HD crap, just not think about it for a while because it is so much for a person to deal with. Granted, I do take it a little bit to the extremes. I have had like obsessive phases my whole life, and it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, but
Uh,
Lainey's obsessions are in art and bands. It's not like you're
yeah,
obsessed with illegal things or activities.
my outlet could be drugs.
I
Like
mean, yeah, you could have a worse outlet.
for sure.
Uh, yeah, it's at least you're self-aware because when you start to
Yeah.
connect the dots, I mean, Lainey and I, not to air it all out there, you can tell me to shut up if I'm speaking too much.
No, you're fine.
I'm just super open, but we've been in therapy on and off our entire lives. And it's been about a year since we've been I don't even know. I'm assuming that they might be doing it online now. The last time we went in person was right before the pandemic hit. And it was when our sister had just been put on hospice for juvenile HD, and she had just turned 14. Um, and so we've gone to the same therapist throughout our entire lives from the time I was 5. So that would have made, you were like 1 or 2. I don't know the first time you actually stepped into Jane's office. I don't know if you're
I don't even remember.
maybe maybe like toddler. But our mom initially started out having us go. It was her counselor for her and my dad before they got divorced. So it was kind of nice to have someone who knew our parents and how they acted when we would tell these stories. But our mom has always been very supportive and active in our mental health, which I always stress how much I appreciate for us, because not only is it hard as a young kid when you're going through something at that point in time, a divorce is traumatic, because you don't think that your parents are going to separate. And honestly, I think it would almost be more traumatic if it happened later in life when you think that they're going to be together forever. But she wanted us to have an outlet to talk to. And we've seen Jane, pretty much only Jane, throughout our entire life. And it's been really beneficial to have someone to just fall back on whenever times get really tough. And especially if you build up that relationship, you can go in and just say, hey, here's what's going on. And you don't have to get into the backstory. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to heal trauma, you have to go and heal those band-aids, pull out the past. But if you just want to come in and vent, it's like having a best friend, but they're your therapist, so they understand the psychology behind it. But to understand those types of trauma responses, I am God bless TikTok. Apparently, I am on therapy TikTok now. I don't know how that happened. I started out with kids and puppies, which is probably foreshadowing my future. And then it was funny. And now it's all therapy and deep stuff and music, which, I guess goes along the lines. But all these things that these therapists are now on my feed telling me are trauma responses. I'm like, is everything I do a trauma response? So, for example, they said, do you have 1 or 2 TV shows that you watch obsessively over and over again, or maybe a movie? This might be a trauma response because you are comfortable with the setting, you know the plot, you know the climax, you know how it's going to end. And if you grew up in an unstable circumstance, you never had that. And all of a sudden I went, wait a second. So you're telling me that me watching Vampire Diaries or Gossip Girl over and over again is not because I have an obsessive problem, but because it's a trauma response. That's great. Also found out that being a night owl could be a trauma response.
That is me as well. Yeah.
And it's me too. And that's been our joke, is that our family's just like on the Lentz side, we're all night owls. But maybe we've just all been maybe we've just all been through trauma. They said if you experienced an unstable home growing up and you now consider yourself a night owl as an adult, it could be because of the correlation of when everyone was in bed, that was the only time you felt peace and you felt like you could escape. So all of a sudden I'm going, wait, all these things that I just attributed to my personality and my genetics, these are now trauma responses. So yeah, being able to connect the dots, it's very important.
Yeah, I can't see those 2 examples don't make sense. I can see them in myself as well.
No, it's scary once you realize that they do make sense.
Yeah. I feel like there used to be such a stigma on like going to counseling, but I think it's gotten so much better because so many people are realizing that your mental health really is just as important as your physical health. Like it's just like going to the doctor to like mend your body. Sometimes you need to do that for your mentality as well. And I haven't been in a while, but I should probably go back.
Yeah, we started about 20, and you were a few years old, so maybe not exactly 20 for you, but I was 5. I'm almost 24, so it's been just on the cusp of 20 years. And you're right, back then, mental health really wasn't an open conversation. And it was kind of like, if you can't see it, it's not there, which obviously mental health, you can't see it outright, but you can definitely see the effects of it. You know, if
Yeah.
someone's feeling a certain way and then they act a certain way because of the way that their mind is making them feel, I definitely think you can see it in those ways. But initially, it was, you know, if you can't see it, it's not there. So don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think
I
we've come a long way.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do have some. Obviously, I don't remember that much what I was thinking when I was like 4. I do kind of remember that when I was younger, at like school and things, I would make sure not to talk about me going to counseling because in a way, I almost felt like people would think like, oh, there's something
Really?
wrong with her. Why does she need counseling? But as I grew up, I was like, I mean, obviously, I'm not going around telling everybody, hey, I'm going to therapy, but like, I'm definitely open to talking about it. Like, I think people shouldn't be ashamed. Like, there's nothing wrong with making sure that you're okay mentally, or as
Yeah,
okay as you can be.
that's a great point because the more open you are about things, whether it's mental health, physical health, or, you know, living with HD and people who are going through similar circumstances, the more people that are brave enough or have the opportunity to speak out about it, it minimizes this stigma that, oh, that makes you abnormal, that makes you weird, because all of a sudden you have multiple people in your life that are now saying, oh, well, I also go to therapy, or oh, I also struggle with this mental health issue or this trauma or this eating disorder, like whatever it is. If people have, because not everyone's at a place where they can talk about it openly, but if someone is, and the more people that start to do it, you know, you have that domino effect. And then all of a sudden, someone now going into therapy, I would hope a young kid who's, you know, the same age we were when we started going, they're not going to think twice about it because no one stigmatizes it.
Yeah, definitely.
So going back to therapy and just growing up, I know this is really picking your brain because Lainey is literally on the cusp of 20. So it's not like it's not like she's old by any means. She can't
I
even
don't know.
legally
I
drink
can't
yet.
believe I'm almost 20. That blows my mind. I feel like I'm 14.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like mentally, I still feel like
Yeah,
I'm 17 and I'm just about to graduate high school. And yet
yeah.
I've graduated college. I have a house. I have 2 dogs. I have a job.
I
I
can
have
do
student
that.
debt.
Mhm.
And also, you know, these were times before HD, which is kind of crazy to think that there was a time in our life, at least before HD.
Yeah.
But most of our childhood, it wasn't apparent except for the side effects of it that we saw in our dad or even in Brianna and her symptoms progressing from what we feel like was at, you know, the age of 7.
Mhm.
Do you remember a specific like moment or period in your life where all of a sudden you started to feel like something was off with dad that made you that you think was HD?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely very frustrating for such a long time because we were so confused by dad's behavior. Like, I remember one minute he's fine, and then the next, I remember little things like spilling water. Like, he would get so mad, and we were like, oh my God, like, why is dad so mad? And he had so many behaviors that we just could not explain. Like, it was so weird how he would be fine one moment, like fun, cheery dad, and then so quickly he would get so angry. But at the same time, it was in a way sort of nice when I started to really realize what it was to be like, oh, you know what, this makes so much sense. Like, I finally understand now why he was behaving the way he was. And it wasn't just anger. He was experiencing a lot of the HD symptoms where it's so scary, but people who are affected can often like create their own reality. So we would try to, I remember we'd try to talk to him about things and be like, you know, why did you do this? And he would claim he didn't even do them, or, you know, it just made no sense. We were so confused about his behavior. And I, even for quite a long time, uh, I didn't necessarily cut him off, but there were definitely years where I rarely talked to dad. I didn't really have an interest in having a relationship with him because of so many years of this behavior. So when I found out about HD, obviously it doesn't excuse everything, but it did make me regret, in a way, a lot of the time that I'd been resenting him because I was like, oh my God, he has this disease that I had no clue about. So I definitely have a lot of guilt there. I have the same guilt with Brianna too because we butted heads so much growing up.
Oh my gosh,
And,
yeah.
yeah,
Like
that
early
definitely
on.
that keeps me up at night that we used to be so rude to each other because now I'm like, what I wouldn't give to go back and just enjoy the time I had with her. Sorry.
It's
But yeah,
okay.
it connects so many dots. Like there's so much unknown and confusion before you find out. And so then when we did finally find out, even though it's horrible and terrible, it does explain so much, which is nice in a way to know where it's coming from and be able to process when things are happening like that. This is HD. That's what's happening here.
Yeah. And you can't be too hard on yourself because yes, Brie had HD and we didn't know. And there's part of us that thinks that, I mean, it could have just been age and also the other circumstances that were going on in our house that would make her lash out because it was not a positive environment for most of her early childhood or ours. But I mean, aside from that, and then the HD potentially initially making her get into these outbursts like dad had, which is really strange because our grandpa has that, which we didn't know until we talked to our grandma because we've never seen it. But he goes through those anger bursts. Our dad goes through those. And Brianna did early, like when she was little. But then as she got older and then she actually got diagnosed and her symptoms progressed, she got worse in other areas, but anger was not a thing anymore. I mean, obviously, if our brother Brady would make her mad at some points, she would be like, but she was like the sweetest human
She
being
was.
ever. She was back then when she had her outburst too. I mean, she was so young,
She was so,
but
so sweet. We would
yeah.
just
Oh,
give her moments.
oh
It
yeah.
definitely wasn't all her as well.
No, but it's just so strange to see how it progressed for her in comparison to dad and grandpa. And the other thing is, my favorite quote from Don Peasley. He's in the HD community. He's on the HDSA
Yeah,
Michigan board as the president. Yeah, great guy. His wife has Huntington's, and he always says HD is like a snowflake. Everyone has a similar circumstance, similar symptoms, but not everyone has the exact same. Because snowflakes, they're the same thing, but they don't all look the same. They have different patterns, different edges. And I love that because that's the only way I can, draw a conclusion with this, with the way that things went. And Brianna also had juvenile Huntington's, which is a completely different beast than the regular Huntington's. But I have talked to people before where they go, things weren't great. And obviously, when HD came into our life, all this changed and it was really upsetting. But so and so, whether it was, mom, dad, cousin, nephew, friend, spouse, they didn't have these anger outbursts that we experienced with dad or grandma experienced with grandpa. But there are some people that I've talked to, or even some previous guests on the show, who, when we start talking about like trauma and mommy or daddy issues, they're like, oh, yeah, my mom used to do this and throw that and say this and get locked up here. And I was like, wow, okay. Like some of us aren't alone in how our childhoods looked, but other people, like they never experienced that. So it's just really interesting. But I do remember so many times growing up where, it would just be a one-on-one with dad or both of us where something would happen. And I mean, there were times we'd sit in the car with him for hours in between. I don't know if you remember this. There's a time where we sat in our mom's driveway because, like I said,
I
they're
remember.
divorced, and we had 50-50 custody all the way up until dad started. His house was toxic with him and our stepmom and that situation. So our mom ended up getting full custody, and then dad just had visitation whenever we allowed it. At that point, I was a junior going on a senior in high school. So it really didn't affect me. It was more for you that after I had went out of state to go to school, you didn't have to be forced to go there 50-50. Yeah. But we sat in the driveway for 2 hours. I think maybe it might have even been longer. And we just said everything that was going on, how we felt about like, the abuse and the toxicity, and that we didn't feel like he was listening and that he always, chose everyone over us. And he cried and cried and he said, no, I get it. Like, I'm going to change. And then like a week later, it was like we never had that conversation. And I think that that was almost the breaking point, was us trying and trying and then getting nothing out of it except for maybe us feeling better for, you know, a week until things started to go back to the way that they were. But that was a consistent pattern throughout, at least what I can remember, with most of my early teenage, like tweenage and teenage years. There'd be times where we'd get in a fight, or he would say something super awful, or him and our stepmom would get in like a verbal, then turn into a physical fight that would end up with the cops coming to our house all the time. And when we would confront it, or if I would say something, we'd get in a fight, he would deny that it ever happened, or he would change the story entirely. And to me, and I'm assuming, you know, to you and the other siblings, it just kind of felt like a slap in the face, like, oh, I'm not listening, or I'm listening, but I'm just picking out which pieces I'm going to actually act on or respond to.
Yeah.
And that's why it got to the point where for a while before the diagnosis, because his diagnosis was a year into my college career. So it was later on, but there was a time where once mom had full custody, we really didn't communicate with him at all unless if he engaged with us first. And you know, it does give clarity, but it's still hard because you remember all those different things that you experienced and you go through, and you know, being called out of class to talk to child protective services for the 12th time, or going to court with him and our mom to try and get custody because we were being driven with drunk, or we were watching them get into physical altercations and the police were at our house. And you know, you just get to a point where it doesn't feel like any of it's ever going to make sense, or that any of it's going to be worth trying to have a relationship when all you remember for the most part are these toxic memories. And I mean, at least for me, I kind of remember a time before HD, in between when he and mom split up and then he got remarried, where and you were like 2. So I don't think you would remember at all. But
No, not much.
the only thing I remember is home videos of you like dancing and singing and saying Santa really cutely. But I remember dad and I saved up, and I am not a gamer. I don't think I ever was. I'm definitely not now. But back then, like, I loved to play video games with dad. I don't know. That was just our thing. And so we saved up to buy what at the time was super cool PlayStation 2, I think it was, like those big, fat, thick boxes that used to be the thing. And we were sitting on the floor counting up cash, rolling up coins, and we bought this thing and we would just play on it all the time. But then we also got into a period where, you know, he wouldn't cook for us or make us food. So we were eating candy and chunky chicken noodle soup.
Honestly, as a
we'd go over.
kid, that was the look.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, maybe that and going camping as a family.
Yeah.
But other than that, it felt like there to all of the toxic, like heightened things that happen was completely blurred. I don't think it happened overnight, but like reflecting on it in my memory, it feels like it was an overnight transition to things were okay and now things are really scary and we don't know why.
Yeah, I
But
think for so long when we were young, I think things were happening, but we were just so oblivious to it because we were so young. And so I remember as I aged and I started to realize what was going on, it was like everything got so real so quickly.
that's true too, because like you said, when you look back on it and you have a little bit of clarity, it does make things fall into place a little bit. I mean, I think that the biggest blessing is just, even though it happened, you can't erase that it happened, because that's a part of life. The past is the past. And even though it's not the present, it can still affect your present moments, your present joy, your present peace, if you don't learn how to cope with it. And in a weird way, I feel like HD gave us a way to cope with it, because before it was like resentment. I hate you guys. I don't want to talk to you guys. I don't want you in my life. And now it's okay. You know, I don't think things are ever going to be the way that they were before HD or before those things happened. But like, I I don't have all this built up resentment and angst that I had as a teenager at 24. I mean, you're always going to be thinking about those things in your subconscious. You're always going to have to be grieving, you know, what once was before someone got sick or before someone did the abuse. But now it's like I just have to work on healing my part of that and my inner child, which is still a working process. But at least the resentment is gone, because I feel like that was more
Yeah.
tiring than anything else.
I feel the same way. I'm obviously never gonna forget everything that happened, but I feel like I've let go of most of the negative feelings that used to like follow me around all the time. Cause I was an angry child. Like you were nicer than I was. I was mean. I was mean to dad in the height of it all. Crazy. Don't talk
Yeah.
to us. But I definitely moved past that, and I definitely regret in a way the way that I used to act now that I know how that a lot of it was probably HD. That definitely hurts at times to be like, wow, I was so mean for nothing. I was so angry. I mean, not for nothing. Obviously, we were going through so much, and at the time, we had no clue. And I also don't want to make it sound like we had all those problems, but it was all HD. Everything else was great.
Right.
Like that is not the truth at all. There were so many problems. HD just made it so much worse. But it definitely is nice to look back on my childhood and be able to say, no, I don't know which of these behaviors that we suffered from were them just, doing it or what was caused by HD. And our stepmom had her own at the time issues as well. They were just both, they had their own problems, and then together it was not great. And then all of us kids were just there. Yeah, it was a lot, but I think I've moved past it for the most part, and I really hope that you and Brady and Kylie have as well.
Yeah. But I think the nice part is, you know, you keep saying, I feel bad that I treated him like that, or I didn't know. At least, you know, now. And you get time to try and heal and build a bit of a relationship back. And it wasn't like one day you just woke up, you realized that there was HD, and then that person that you had all this anger, you know, if something traumatic happened and they were gone. I feel like it would be harder to deal with those emotions if you didn't have at least an opportunity to try and mend it, and, you
Yeah,
know, they were
definitely.
just gone. Because even despite everything, you know, it's still a dad at the end of the day. And yeah, I mean, things are never going to be the same once you get a life threatening disease, especially, you know, with Brianna's circumstance, because I would say we started seeing symptoms of something. We just didn't know what when she was like 7, because she went from being able to like be super advanced, super intelligent, could remember all these things at such a young age and tell all these facts and stories. And then she started to decline. And, you know, I remember in swimming, she was in all these sports, and all of a sudden she couldn't keep up in swimming. She couldn't really stay afloat. All these things that it's like, why one moment is she at her height at, you know, 5 or 6, and now she's 7 and she can't remember these things or have the strength that she had when she should be getting stronger every single year because she's a child. And I don't even know like when I started to realize that something was significantly wrong. I know that she got her Make-A-Wish trip before she'd been diagnosed, I think. No, she had just been diagnosed, right? Did she get her Make-A-Wish trip right before we found out it was HD? Because she was
I'm blanking.
originally diagnosed with like a bone marrow disease.
Yeah, she was misdiagnosed so many times. I remember that.
I
Um,
think that that's when though I did start to see symptoms, because when you'd have a conversation, she wasn't always quite there like she used to be. But with her, I mean, it happened so quickly after she was diagnosed. It was like, you know, a blink of an eye. I really don't remember. When you start to look back at pictures like we did last year, that started bringing back memories of, oh, remember when she did this, and remember when we went here. But like with Bree, I really don't remember much of a time before Huntington's.
Yeah. I definitely have some memories of young Bree. She was very energetic, very sassy,
Yeah.
very fun. Well, she was always fun, but um, yeah. Sorry.
No, it's hitting for me now because as we're recording this, it's the first week of February. And last January, we got the call that she was put on hospice. And then in February is her birthday. So her birthday is the 17th of February. And she would have been 15 this year. And then it was like right after her birthday, we got a call a month later that she was in the hospital and it was not looking optimistic. And because COVID had just come into full swing, we didn't even think she'd get to come home from the hospital. And if that was the case, we wouldn't even be able to be there with her during her last moments, which was a traumatizing call to get all in itself, because you're hearing that someone you love is probably not going to make it much longer and you might not get to be there. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. They brought her home by ambulance, and from the entire like first week of April or second week of April, we were with her. But I don't know. I feel like all these emotions are starting to come back to me because I think I have repressed the entire last year, and probably most people listening have repressed most of 2020 because whether you lost someone or not, it was not a fun year by any means. But all of a sudden now I, will wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh my gosh, this was the day that we got the call. And this day she would have been this old. And it's hard because you start to feel better and then something comes back that reminds you, and all of a sudden it feels like you're back in that moment again. And it does not feel like a year, and at 4 weeks at most, maybe 2.
I feel the same way. Sorry.
No, I'm
Definitely like it's been like 10 months and I feel like I haven't even like processed it yet still. So it's just I feel like I again probably not the best coping mechanism, but I feel like I usually try to just pretend that like it didn't happen because that's definitely the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And so it's just so hard to come to terms with. Like I never want to sit down and just think about Bree being gone. And I know that's part of the healing process and I really need to, but it's just like why do I want to like I don't want to confront those emotions. So I think I very much so just like try to go about my day, but obviously that doesn't always work. I think about her all the time or something will happen and I'll be like forced to remember her, which is always nice, but I'm definitely it doesn't feel like 10 months at all. I feel like it just happened. Like it's as evidenced by right now, I can't really even like think or talk about Bree still without like kind of losing it. So sorry everybody listening.
not too sorry.
But yeah, this is probably good for me to be forced to talk about it because I definitely prefer not to. But I know that's not how you cope and
Well,
move
in
on.
your defense, I like have made so much time in my privacy to just like cry in my car or when I'm taking a shower, especially when you're taking a shower, because then it doesn't feel like you're crying. You just got water on your face. But I've had so many times where I cried and cried and cried. And then I feel like once I hit a certain mark of just crying and crying, I got to the point where like I went numb. And so now I'm like in that numb phase where it hurts to talk about it, but I feel like I've cried every last ounce of liquid out of my body. and I don't know how to explain it. But everyone I've talked to that's lost someone close to them, especially like before they thought that they would, whether it's our mom losing our grandpa, her dad. I remember after we lost Bree, she said it's not going to be easy. And there's going to be days, like months or years down the line, where you just cry and you don't know why, because you feel like you've gotten over the hard part. And there's people I've talked to who have lost a sibling by, they took their own life, and now they're trying to figure out how to process them being gone and why they're gone. I've also talked to friends right after we lost Bree who, again, like God's timing, two friends in particular I can think about who both lost their mom to cancer. And both of them, once they got diagnosed, the mothers, it's like almost the exact same story. And both of these are really good friends of mine. They lost their mom like within months. And so it's nice to have people who, I hate to say get it, because everyone reacts differently, but grief is just, I feel like it's one of those things where until you lose someone super close to you, because we loved our grandpa, but we were so young that I was 8, you were, 4. We couldn't really process it. But once you get to be old enough and you understand and you lose someone, especially a sibling, because you don't imagine you're going to lose your sibling, especially early on in life, it's almost like you see a ghost, and once you see it, you can't go back. And only the other people who have seen ghosts understand that type of like pain and trauma, because I never understood when someone lost. Obviously, everyone says I'm sorry for your loss, and that's the most they can do is say I'm sorry and or I'm praying for you if they're spiritual. But it's like after you go through it, you're talking to someone else who has, you don't really have to say anything to just know that they get it and that they're there, which is super like out of this world type of feeling. Um, but yeah, trauma's fun. It's been interesting trying to navigate the sadness, the grief, the highs, the lows, because I don't know if you've experienced this, but I feel like there's some days where I'm like, wow, this has been such a great day. And it's like your brain is so excited because you feel like you've had a good day and it's documenting everything in your head. But then at the same time, the devil on your shoulder is like, well, at any moment it could turn to crap. And I'm going to be here to remind you of all the things that you were sad about for the last 7 days, because it's almost like being happy. And I hate to think, I don't think it's realistic to think every single day you're going to be absolutely happy, because I think a lot of us are chasing happiness, and that's a destination that you're not going to find every day, and you kind of have to create yourself or through your faith or through your loved ones. But like, it's just this thought of, I've hit this really good moment. Now, when's it going to come crashing down? It's like you can't even enjoy it because you're just waiting for it to go away. So I'm still trying to navigate through that emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, definitely. It's getting a lot better too now that some time has passed, but I know a lot closer to Brianna's passing, I would kind of experience a feeling like that, where if I had a good day where I was like, you know what, like I felt okay today, like able to go on with myself, there was almost like some guilt in that. I was like, well, I shouldn't have a good day. Like I should be sad. Like I should be devastated. So that's getting better, obviously, now that more time has passed. But as much as you want to be able to like go about your life, like I know me at least, I almost like feel bad at the same time that like, well, I shouldn't be able to do that. Like I lost so much.
That's such a hard
Like so
concept.
devastated. So yeah, it's
Uh,
not easy. Anybody who's ever lost a loved one, I'm so sorry because this sucks. It's definitely like that is like the worst possible feeling I can think about in life is to lose the people around you. So having to, I mean, obviously we did experience it with our grandpa. That was devastating, but we were both so much younger, and at the time, since we didn't get as much time with Papa, it was almost more like, wow, I feel so bad for Nana that she's lost her husband, or Mom that she's lost her dad. Um, Whereas with Brie, like that's our sister. So it's just really hard. Yeah.
That's
Sorry, I didn't think I would like get emotional
oh,
like this.
don't be sorry. I feel bad for getting you so emotional.
No, no, you're just asking like basic questions, and I'm like,
No,
well.
it's there's, if someone hasn't gone through grief or loss yet, unfortunately, I mean that was the biggest eye opener after we lost Bree. I remember texting mom because we were still at our stepmom's apartment with Bree and our dad and our other siblings. And right after we lost her, I remember I texted our mom and I was like, how on earth do you do this again? Because like it's inevitable that someone in your life is also going to pass again and again before you go. And even that terrifies me thinking about like, okay, well, when I go, like, how are they going to react to it? It's just, you start to think about life and time so differently. And I think that that's why I've always thought, well, I'm not going to lie. When I was a teenager, I thought that 23, 24 was like a mature adult and you'd be married and have kids and like know your life by then, which is so naive of me that I thought that, because I like I said earlier, I still feel like a child. But now that I've gone through a loss and I'm also gene positive, because I try to be very optimistic and I feel like for the most part I am. And if I try to tell myself and pray that I won't get symptomatic or that I can push it off until there's a treatment or a cure, I fully believe in, the power of that. But there's also this, common denominator in my head that's like, okay, well, in a realistic world, like, how much time is it before then? And between that and loss early on in life, you just start to like see life like a ticking clock. And it's so hard because that can make me look at life so beautifully. Like, oh my goodness, like today, at least here in Michigan by the lake, it was so sunny out. And I just remember looking outside my office and I was like, wow, it is so beautiful out today. Like, that's such a blessing. And life is so short. But then there's other days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 24, which or almost 24. But anyone listening, like, I know that that's not old, but I also feel like I have quarter life crisis where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, when is that moment going to come for me, if it does, where I start to feel like I'm not functioning the same, or I'm almost 24 and I haven't done X, Y, or Z yet, and I really want to do X, Y, or Z or make that my life or my passion. And it just really starts to put things into perspective. Like, I feel like now I'm not as invested in putting up with the BS of people who don't belong in your life, and also not trying to settle. I mean, you and I have talked about the fact that I'm really passionate about a lot of different things that I would like to be able to do more and more. And that doesn't happen overnight. But now my philosophy is, well, why the hell not? Like, life is so short, and I've been pushing a lot of things off for 5-10 years now, and one day you're going to wake up and you're not going to be able to push things off anymore, because that might be your last day and you just don't know. So all of a sudden, now that we've lost Bree and I have a positive diagnosis, it's like I look at life in such a philosophical way, but every day is a different way that I look at it, and that probably sounds really strange.
No, I totally understand that. I feel the same way because I feel like I experience pretty much the same things you're talking about. Where I know I'm so young, like I'm not even 20 yet, but part of me like, oh my god, how am I 20? Like I guess I remember going through high school, but like I can't believe it's already done. Like how am I in college? How am I already almost halfway done with college? Like it just I mean, I think that's something everyone can agree on. It's just crazy. Like it goes by so fast and it's so precious. And I feel like everyone already has a sense of that, but when you lose someone, especially someone younger than you, which should never happen, like I obviously wish that I would have been the one to go first versus my younger sister. Like it's just so don't get me wrong, losing anyone is terrible, but I feel like it's just even more like devastating and confusing when it's someone so young. it definitely like shifts your perspective and makes you appreciate everything even more. And I get what you mean. It's not all positive, like, yeah, because these things happen to me, I'm so grateful for, also stressful in a way. It's like, oh my God, life is so short. Like there's so much I want to do and see. And
Yeah.
you just don't know. Like every day is a gift, as cheesy as that sounds. Like when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, econ at 8 a.m. I'm like, you know what? I could have not woken up today. Like I woke
Mhm.
up, I had the day. Um, I don't think that every morning, but I do try to tell myself that if I'm like having a bad day or like I'm feeling grumpy about getting up for the day, I'm like, you know what? You have nothing to complain about. Get up, live your life, you're alive. So I think it's definitely, it shifts your perspective about life a lot for sure.
Yeah. And asking those tough questions or thinking about those things, I would have much rather kept Bree and, not had HD in our life. But at the same time, like you said, these cliches, they're called cliches for a reason, but I also feel like they're called cliches until you experience them and then they make sense. But I do believe everything happens for a reason and in God's timing. And even though it doesn't make any sense to us, the only way I've been able to find peace is knowing that like HD had a reason for being in our lives. And
Mhm.
for each person, that looks very different. Um, I mean, if you look at our other sister, Kylie, before we ever had HD, Kylie's a two-time cancer survivor.
Love you
Like,
so much.
she's a badass,
She
and
is.
she truly feels like her cancer diagnosis 2 times. Second time, God bless St. Jude, they saved her life and removed it with radiation at 6, which is again insane. But she now is dedicating her life to being a nurse and she wants to work in pediatrics with other kids who are sick. And, for me, starting Champions for HD has been very full circle just because I know that obviously without HD I would have never started it. And it's sad to think that something traumatic and life altering had to happen in order for me to do something positive with it. But, for me, whether it's through the nonprofit or my music or, being involved in Miss America, I felt like the moment I got diagnosed, I was supposed to be a champion of it because it is so unknown. And, for Bree, I mean, she obviously we loved her and we still love her because she's our sister. But the amount of people that she touched and impacted, I mean, when we lost her, not only on our personal social media, but the HD support groups, there are some people who listen to this show who sometimes will reach out and say, "Oh, I didn't realize you're Bree's sister. Like I followed her story for years, and I remember seeing this photo of her in a fairy costume, or when she did Girls on the Run, and she did this for me and my family, or my daughter who has JHD." And it still doesn't make it easier to swallow the pill that it's in our life and that she's no longer with us. But when you realize that she truly touched more people in her 14 years than some people who die at a old full life age of 80 touched in that amount of time, you really start to realize like she was an angel, she was a blessing. And the only form of peace I get is knowing that whenever people talk about the afterlife and God and heaven, they say that, when you get there, for the people who are there, it's the most beautiful moment. And it's only us on earth who are grieving. And like, we can't even imagine what it's like to be where she is. Again, that doesn't make it easier, but the only way I can get myself to like sleep at night and get out of bed is knowing she's in a better place. She's with the, the almightiest person she could be with. And I just imagine on days where I feel low that she is dancing and singing and doing all those things that when she got to the end, she was no longer able to do. And that, she found, what was the first dog? Winston. And she found
Mhm.
Winston. And all of her other friends and dogs that were there. And, you know, Nana told me that according to the Bible, when you get there, even though we don't have bodies and we're just spirits, that we recognize everyone that we lost that went to heaven. And it's like this beautiful reunion moment. And so that's literally like the only thing I can get peace is
Yeah.
just by knowing that like someday, even though it's not going to happen at the same time for all of us, that someday we're all going to be there and we'll get to see her in a way that like we never did.
Yeah, that's definitely very inspiring, I guess, because it is really hard to sometimes just think like that's them, like she's gone, but she definitely is in a better place. She didn't deserve to be living the way she was living because she was in so much, especially near the end. We could really tell that she was in so much pain. And it's just like, as much as you selfishly don't want to see anyone you love go, it's just not fair to them to keep them and see them living in so much pain.
I tell people I would never wish that on anyone, to be in the spot where you know that they're on a do not resuscitate order. And even when we brought her home, knowing that there was potentially things we could do overnight to just get her to stop and be comfortable, but at the same time it was just prolonging the inevitable. And everything we did, she was in pain no matter what. I mean, that's a situation that I would not wish on even, you know, my worst enemy, because it's just one of those moments where you feel absolutely helpless. And you, like you said, you feel selfish because you don't want them to go, but you also know that them staying is literally just being selfish because there
I
was
mean,
nothing at
not that
that
you would
point.
have the choice, but
No,
it's
no,
at least nice to know that towards the very end, what Brie was experiencing wasn't living. She was in so much pain on her feeding tubes, on so much medication, and she it just that poor girl went through so much, and so she's definitely in a better place now.
yeah,
And that does give me peace of mind as well to know that her suffering is done. She doesn't have to live through any of that pain anymore.
no, especially with something as brutal as juvenile Huntington's. Who would have thought that? I think they said it's 1 or 10% of HD patients
Yep.
happen to be juvenile, and HD is already as rare as it gets. So the odds that that would happen, but she was a warrior. That's that's
She,
for sure.
mhm.
Well, I have to ask you one question before I can let you go. I ask
Of
everyone.
course.
So, for anyone listening, and I know it's so broad because most people are probably experiencing some form of an HD life, what would you say is your one piece of advice to help them get through this HD chapter?
Um, I would say that whoever is listening, you are not HD. Like, HD is definitely something that you have to come to terms with, you have to deal with, and you have to do whatever you need to do for yourself to cope with it. But I know at times it can feel like HD is your whole life when maybe you're at risk or you have it or you have family who has it that you have to take care of or witness. Um, but it's not everything, and there's still so much more to life, and sometimes it is important to just find other things and not let it consume you. It doesn't need to be everything. But that being said, there is so much that we can take from HD and all of the crap it makes us go through. It definitely makes you appreciate everyone around you and every day. So even though it's very hard and much easier said than done, I would just say that the best thing you can do is try to take the positives from HD and deal with the negatives as they come, but don't let them be your whole life. So
That's so beautiful, and you're so
Okay.
beautiful. Oh my goodness. Can anyone listening believe that this girl's like just almost 20? Because you're basically like 20 going on 30.
Oh.
But you look way younger than that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I don't look 30 yet.
Not that anyone listening, 30 is not old, but
No,
ladies.
30 is not bad at all. I'm still
No, I know
technically
you
a
were saying
teenager,
that, but
so
she's just such a mature young woman, and I love you so much.
I love you so much.
And
You
thank
are
you.
very amazing. Should I take a little moment to hype up the host?
The host, oh,
Yeah,
sure.
I'll just, I can do this because I'm your sister,
Oh,
but
gosh.
I just want to throw it back out you that you're very amazing and you are the living example of what I just said. I mean, obviously you're not optimistic about it all the time because you can't be, but I positives and learned what you could from HD, and now you're doing everything you can to cope with it in your own way. Not saying to anyone listening that, oh my gosh, sorry. What am I know what I'm trying to say. To
Like the
anyone listening, I'm not saying that you need to be super outspoken and have a nonprofit, because that's definitely not for everyone. But
no.
for you, it's amazing, and you do an amazing job. And I know that you inspire so many people as well within the HD community. And you mean a lot to so many people. So
Oh.
thank you for having me. I was very honored to
Oh,
be
thank
on.
you so much. No, I literally asked her what last night. I said, "Hey, can you hop on the show tomorrow?" Because I forgot it's every other week now and I need another guest. So
Yeah,
thank you for
of
being
course.
flexible and very vulnerable. I always say that, but to come on here, anyone who comes on here and shares their story, I just want them to know that I appreciate it. Everyone listening appreciates it because it is like being naked in front of people, except they are just listening. But
Mhm.
it's hard. So thank you so much, and I'm just
Thank you.
so blessed to have you as my sister.
Wow, you too. I love you so much.
Love you.